There are some letters that reach deeper than paper. They touch the soul. Today's letter comes from Hattie, a 45-year-old woman who's carried a burden for almost 15 years. Her husband, Daniel, died in a car accident after an argument that still echoes in her mind. Since that night, her daughter Emily has never forgiven her, never even spoken her name without pain. Hattie writes to me, not for sympathy, but for peace. She asks one question that many of us are too afraid to say out loud. How do you forgive yourself when the person you love most refuses to forgive you? This is her story, and perhaps a reflection for anyone who's ever lived with guilt in silence.
Dear Aunt Grace, every year on his death anniversary, my daughter sends flowers to his grave, but never to me.
Dear Aunt Grace, I've written this letter a dozen times and thrown it away each time. Shame kept me from finishing it. Pride kept me from sending it. But tonight, as I sit by the window with the rain tapping against the glass, I can't hold it inside any longer. My silence has become heavier than the guilt itself. It's been 15 years since my husband Daniel died. 15 years since the night that split my life into before and after. His picture still hangs on the living room wall, the same one I dust every Sunday, but can't bear to move. It's framed in oak, his smile frozen in time, and every time I look at it, I still feel the ache of the words I can't take back. Dear Aunt Grace, I've written this letter a dozen times and thrown it away each time. My daughter Emily hasn't spoken to me in almost 10 years. When I see her photos online, her wedding, her new baby, the milestones I missed, it feels like I'm mourning two people, my husband, who's gone forever, and my daughter, who's still alive but lost to me in another way. People say time heals all wounds, but time doesn't heal a wound you refuse to look at. I thought silence would protect her, that by avoiding the truth, I was saving her from more pain. But silence, Aunt Grace, can be cruel. It doesn't build peace, it builds distance. Before the night that changed everything, Hattie's world was small, simple, but full of love. She had what many of us dream of: a home that smelled of coffee and fresh bread, a husband who made her laugh, and a daughter who saw magic in everything. But even the warmest homes can hide quiet storms. Emily was only 10 when Daniel died. She doesn't remember the details of that night, but she remembers the shouting. She remembers hearing me cry, hearing the door slam, and then the sirens. I never told her what really happened that night. I thought she was too young, too fragile. So I let her grow up believing I was the reason he left the house angry. I let her believe that her father's death was my fault, because in a way, I believed it too. Every night before bed, I pass by that picture on the wall, Daniel, standing by the lake on our last vacation. I remember how he laughed when the wind blew his hat into the water. We had no idea how few moments like that we had left. I kept his things the way he left them, his favorite mug still in the kitchen, the sweater draped over the chair he loved, even the cologne bottle that's long dried up. I told myself I was preserving memories, but really, I was building a museum for my guilt. I've spent 15 years rehearsing apologies I'll probably never get to say. Every time the phone rings, a part of me hopes it's Emily, ready to talk, ready to listen, but it never is. She sends flowers to her father's grave every year, white lilies. And every year, I drive there the next morning, when no one's around, and lay one single rose beside them. I never touch her flowers. I just stand there, staring at his name carved in stone, wondering if he'd forgive me for what I've become. Sometimes I imagine what I'd say to her if she were standing in front of me. I'd tell her that I miss her laugh, the one that used to fill this house like sunlight. I'd tell her I never meant for her to grow up thinking her father's death was her mother's fault. And most of all, I'd tell her that I'm sorry for choosing silence over truth. So I'm writing to you, Aunt Grace, because I don't know how to move forward. How do you forgive yourself when the person you love most refuses to forgive you? How do you let go of guilt when it's the only thing that still connects you to the past? I've carried this pain for so long, it feels like part of my body now. But lately, I feel time slipping away, and I don't want my story to end like this. I want my daughter to know the truth, even if she still chooses not to forgive me. Maybe by writing this, I'm not asking her for forgiveness. Maybe I'm finally asking it of myself. Sometimes, the hardest stories to tell are the ones we tell ourselves. Hattie's words carry a pain many of us understand, the kind of pain that lingers in the quiet spaces between love and regret. But her story doesn't end here, because in the next part of her letter, she finally reveals what really happened the night Daniel died, and the truth she's been hiding for 15 years. Before the night that changed everything, Hattie's world was small, simple, but full of love. She had what many of us dream of, a home that smelled of coffee and fresh bread, a husband who made her laugh, and a daughter who saw magic in everything. But even the warmest homes can hide quiet storms. Before everything fell apart, I used to think we were the happiest family on our street. Our little house sat at the end of Maple Lane, right across from a park where children's laughter never seemed to end. It wasn't big, just 2 bedrooms, a creaky porch, and a kitchen that always smelled like cinnamon and coffee. But it was ours. Daniel built the wooden swing in the front yard with his own hands. Emily called it the flying chair, and every evening after dinner, he'd push her until the stars came out. I used to watch from the porch with a cup of tea, memorizing their laughter. I wish I'd known how precious those sounds were. Daniel wasn't a rich man, but he had a way of making the ordinary feel special. He'd come home from work, tired, dusty, smelling like oil and sun, but still find the energy to lift Emily into the air and spin her around. She'd giggle so hard she'd get hiccups. Our Sundays were sacred. We had pancake mornings, just the 3 of us. Daniel would make them too thick. Emily would pour too much syrup, and I'd pretend to scold them both while laughing. After breakfast, we'd pile into his old blue truck and drive with the windows down. Daniel would sing along to songs from the radio, horribly off-key, and Emily would join him with her tiny voice, turning every drive into a concert. Every spring we planted roses together. Daniel used to joke that Emily's roses bloomed faster because she sang to them. He'd kneel beside her, showing her how to pack the soil just right, while I stood at the kitchen window watching them, my whole world framed by sunlight and petals. But even perfect pictures fade when you look close enough. Daniel had dreams bigger than Maple Lane. He wanted to open his own garage one day, stop working for others, and build something of his own. I wanted that for him too. But dreams take money, and money was the one thing we never had enough of. The bills started to pile up. Emily needed braces, our roof leaked every monsoon season, and Daniel began working longer hours. The laughter around our dinner table grew quieter, replaced by tired sighs and half-finished conversations. I remember one night he came home past midnight. I was waiting up pretending to read. He smelled like engine grease and exhaustion. "You should sleep," he said softly. "You should rest," I replied. We both smiled, but it didn't reach our eyes. That's when I started to feel it, the distance growing like a shadow between us. I thought if I just held everything together, cooked his favorite meals, kept the house spotless, smiled even when I felt empty. Things would go back to the way they were. But love doesn't heal when it's hidden behind routine. Daniel stopped telling me about his days. I stopped asking. We still said, "I love you," but the words started sounding like habit instead of truth. Emily was the only thing keeping us connected. She was 10 by then, curious, talkative, and full of questions about the world. She adored her father. He was her hero, her safe place. Every time she heard his truck pull into the driveway, she'd drop whatever she was doing and run to meet him. Sometimes, watching them together, I'd feel a pinch of jealousy. Not because of the love they shared, but because I missed being part of that laughter. Looking back now, I realize that love doesn't disappear overnight. It fades quietly, like a candle burning out. One small argument, one missed apology, one exhausted sigh at a time. But when you're living inside it, you don't notice. You just keep hoping tomorrow will be better. I told myself we were fine, that every couple goes through rough patches, that his silence was just stress. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. We were two people living in the same house, walking around each other's pain. And then came the night when everything changed. The night I said words I can never take back. The night Daniel walked out that door and never came home again. It's strange how the most ordinary days can turn into memories that haunt us forever. Hattie's home was full of laughter once, full of the kind of love that doesn't need grand gestures. But life has a way of testing even the strongest hearts. And for Hattie, that test came one stormy evening when the cracks in her marriage finally broke open. In her next letter, she takes us to that night, the argument that began with love and ended in tragedy. They say tragedy doesn't arrive with warning, but sometimes it whispers for weeks before it shatters your life. Hattie's letter continues on a night that began like any other. An ordinary evening, dinner left cold on the stove, and a woman waiting for the man she loved to come home. It was a Thursday. I remember because Thursdays were Daniel's longest days. He was supposed to be home by 8, but when the clock struck 9:30, I'd already reheated dinner twice. Emily had gone upstairs, pretending to study, though I could tell she was listening for his truck like I was. When his headlights finally pulled into the driveway, I felt a wave of relief, followed instantly by frustration. Relief that he was safe, and frustration that I had to feel that way every night. He came in smelling like rain and engine oil, his shoulders heavy, his eyes tired. "Sorry I'm late," he said quietly, placing his keys on the counter. I wanted to say it was okay. I wanted to let it go. But instead, I said the one thing that had been building up inside me for months. "Sorry isn't going to pay the bills, Daniel." He froze. I could see his jaw tighten, that flicker of defensiveness crossing his face, the same one that always turned small talk into tension. "You think I'm not trying?" he asked. I should have stopped right there. I should have taken a breath. But something inside me, pride, exhaustion, maybe resentment, pushed the words out before I could stop them. "Trying doesn't put food on the table, Daniel. You're never home, and when you are, you're too tired to even look at us." He looked at me then, really looked, and the sadness in his eyes cut deeper than anger ever could. "I'm doing this for us, Hattie," he said quietly. "You think I like missing dinner? You think I don't notice my own daughter avoiding me because I'm always at work?" "Then maybe come home once in a while," I snapped. "Because the way things are going, there won't be a family left to come home to." He dropped his gaze, shaking his head. "You think I don't feel that too?" I saw his lips tremble before he spoke again. "Do you have any idea how small a man feels when he can't give his family what they deserve?" That's when I said it. The thing I've replayed in my head 1,000 times since. Then maybe you shouldn't have promised what you couldn't keep. The moment the words left my mouth, I wanted to grab them back, but it was too late. Daniel's face went pale. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He just stood there, staring at me, like he was realizing something was truly broken. "You really think that low of me?" he whispered. I didn't answer, and that silence, that stupid, prideful silence, was louder than any scream. Emily must have been listening. I heard a soft creak upstairs, like someone shifting near the banister. But I was too lost in the moment to care. Daniel grabbed his jacket. "I need to cool off," he muttered. "I'll be back." The door slammed. The windows shook, and just like that he was gone. At first I didn't panic. Daniel always drove around when he was angry. He'd return once he calmed down. I sat on the couch, the house unnaturally quiet except for the rain. Emily came downstairs in her pajamas, her eyes red. "Are you and Dad fighting again?" she asked softly. I forced a smile. "It's just a misunderstanding, sweetheart. He'll be home soon." But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. Hours passed. The clock ticked louder with every minute. I tried calling his phone, no answer. I paced the living room, then the hallway, then the porch. The rain didn't stop, neither did the worry. At 1:47 a.m., the phone rang. It was the police. I still remember the officer's voice. Calm, rehearsed, detached. "Ma'am, there's been an accident on Highway 17. Are you the wife of Daniel Moore?" My throat closed. "Yes," I whispered. He hesitated. That pause people take before they deliver the kind of truth that ruins you. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. Your husband's car collided with a guardrail. He didn't make it." The room started spinning. The phone slipped from my hand. I remember hearing Emily's footsteps on the stairs, the panic in her voice, the fear in her eyes. "Mom? What happened? Where's Dad?" I couldn't answer. I just sank to the floor and cried, the kind of cry that comes from the soul, raw and soundless. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. They took us to the hospital to identify him. I remember the smell, antiseptic and rain-soaked clothes. I remember holding Emily's hand so tightly she winced. When they pulled back the sheet, my legs gave out. His face was peaceful, almost asleep. No anger, no pain, just stillness. I touched his cheek, still warm, and that's when Emily whispered the words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. "You made him leave." Mom! She didn't mean it to be cruel. She was a child in shock, desperate to make sense of what had happened. But in that moment, it felt like a sentence, like she had spoken my punishment out loud. I didn't correct her. I didn't tell her the truth, that her father had been distracted by his own thoughts, that the roads were slick, that no one was to blame. Because deep down, I didn't believe it myself. I thought I had made him leave. I thought my words had killed him. The funeral was a blur of faces and condolences. Emily stood beside me, her small hands clenched in fists. She didn't cry. She didn't look at me. She just kept staring at the casket, like she was waiting for him to wake up. When everyone left, she finally spoke. "You shouldn't have yelled at him, Mom." I opened my mouth to explain, to say something, anything, but nothing came out. Because what could I possibly say? That I didn't mean it? That love and anger sometimes sound the same when you're tired? So instead I said nothing, and that silence became our new way of living. That was the day I lost both of them, my husband to the accident, and my daughter to my guilt. Grief doesn't just come from death. Sometimes it's born in the words we wish we'd never said. Hattie's pain is the kind that doesn't fade because it's built on silence, her own and her daughter's. But guilt, is a prison we build ourselves. And the only way out is through truth. In her next letter, Hattie begins to confront that truth, what really happened that night, and how love can still find its way back through forgiveness. When words are buried, they don't disappear. They turn into ghosts that follow us. Hattie's ghost was silence, 15 years of it. After Daniel's funeral, the house didn't just feel empty. It felt like it stopped breathing. The walls still held his laughter, but the air felt heavy, like it was grieving with me. Emily stayed for only 3 days after we buried her father. On the 4th morning, she packed a small bag and left with my in-laws. She didn't even look back when the car pulled away. I watched from the porch, holding the same coffee mug Daniel used every morning. The coffee had gone cold hours ago. I thought she'd come back in a week. She never did. When a child blames you, the silence hurts more than any words. For Hattie, each day without her daughter was a reminder that she was living a life she no longer deserved. At first I wrote to her. Every week, I told her how school must be going, how proud her father would be of her, how much I loved her. I slipped photos of the garden we used to plant together, the roses, now grown wild, hoping maybe she'd remember the scent and come home. But the letters came back unopened, on her birthdays. I sent gifts, nothing grand, just things that mattered. Her father's watch, her favorite childhood book, a locket with all 3 of our names engraved. Each one was returned with a small note from her grandmother. Please stop sending these. That sentence broke something in me. I stopped sending things after that, not because I stopped loving her, but because I couldn't bear the rejection anymore. I started volunteering at the local church. At first, I went to keep myself busy, arranging flowers, cleaning pews, handing out bread to the homeless. But after a while, I realized I was really there to talk to God, because He was the only one who would still listen. I told Him about Daniel, about Emily, about how guilt felt heavier than any illness. I prayed every night. If I can't have forgiveness from my daughter, then let me at least learn how to forgive myself. But no answer came. Just silence, the same silence that filled the house after the accident. Some silences aren't cruel. They're simply too deep for words. But for Hattie, that silence became a wall she built around herself, one brick at a time. I still kept Daniel's chair at the table. Every Sunday, I cooked his favorite meal, roast chicken with rosemary and lemon, and placed his plate just as I used to. I'd sit across from that empty chair and whisper what I should have said that night before he left. I'm sorry, it became my ritual. My punishment, maybe. Even after all these years, I could still see the dent his elbow left in the armrest. Some nights I'd wake up and swear I heard his footsteps down the hall. I used to think grief fades with time, but I was wrong. It just changes shape, from sharp pain to quiet companionship. I stopped going out. Stopped talking to people. Friends would call, but I always told them I was busy. Truth is, I just couldn't stand to see their happiness. Mirrors became my enemy. Every time I looked, I saw the same woman who made her husband leave, who failed as a wife, and worse, as a mother. I filled my house with distractions, old books, charity work, endless cleaning, but guilt always found me in the quiet moments. And then, last winter, I fell sick. At first it was just fatigue. Then came the hospital visits, the tests, the words no one wants to hear. Chronic heart failure. The doctor said I needed to slow down, to rest. I smiled. Rest was all I had left. Illness doesn't always arrive from the body. Sometimes it begins in the heart, the one wound we never treat because we think we deserve it. I started keeping a small journal. I called it Letters I'll Never Send. Every night, I wrote to Emily. I told her about my day, the weather, the garden, my regrets. I told her about the pain in my chest that no medicine could fix. I don't know if she'll ever read them, but writing them makes me feel like she's still listening somehow. Sometimes I imagine her walking through the door, standing in that same hallway where Daniel used to hang his coat. She's grown now, maybe a mother herself. And in my dreams, she doesn't look angry anymore. She just says, "Mom, it wasn't your fault." I always wake up crying. I think that's why I finally wrote to you, Aunt Grace. I don't expect answers. I don't expect miracles. I just wanted to leave my truth somewhere before I go. Maybe if you read it out loud, somewhere in the world, my daughter will hear it and know that her mother loved her till her last breath. Hattie's words remind us that love doesn't end with anger. It just waits. Somewhere, maybe years later, the heart finds its way back to forgiveness. But for now, Hattie waits in her quiet home, her faith the only candle still burning. Some letters don't just arrive in the mail, they arrive in the heart. 15 years after her husband's death, and nearly a decade since her daughter last spoke to her, Hattie finally received one. It was an ordinary morning, or at least it started that way. The rain had stopped after 3 days, and the air smelled of wet earth and lavender. I was making tea when I heard the creak of the gate outside. I didn't think much of it. The postman still came out of habit, even though most days there was nothing for me. But that morning something made me look up. Maybe it was instinct, maybe grace. On the table lay a small white envelope. My name, Mom, written in familiar handwriting I hadn't seen since Emily was 16. I froze. My hands trembled so badly I could hardly open it. Dear Mom, I don't know why I'm writing this now. Maybe because I'm tired of pretending I don't care, tired of hating you, tired of carrying a story that's heavier than I am. For years I told myself you were the reason Dad died. That if you hadn't argued, if you hadn't said those words, he wouldn't have left that night. I saw him slam the door. I heard the car start. I heard the tires on the gravel. And when they told me he was gone, all I could see was your face. You fought with Dad that night. He left angry. You never said sorry. I can't forget that. For every sentence of blame, there's a heartbeat of pain. Emily's anger was never just anger. It was love, buried under loss. She wrote about the years that followed, how she moved in with her grandparents, how she tried to erase my name from her life. She said she avoided photos, avoided birthdays, avoided even thinking of me. Because every time she did, it brought the same image. That night, that argument, that slammed door. She wrote, I thought forgetting you would make the pain smaller. It didn't. It just made me smaller. Then she said something that made my heart stop. Last week, Grandma gave me Dad's old journal. She said I was old enough to read it now. Inside, he'd written almost every night, small, simple entries. Notes about work, about the garden, about me, about Emily. The final entry was dated the night he died. Had a fight with Hattie. Said things I shouldn't have. She's been holding this house together while I fall apart. I don't know how to fix what's breaking between us. Maybe I'll take a drive, clear my head. God, I love her. I hope she knows that. Emily wrote, when I read that, something inside me cracked. All these years I thought you drove him away. But maybe we both did. Maybe he just didn't know how to stay. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't come from words. It comes from truth, finally spoken after years of silence. Her letter changed as it went on. The anger faded, replaced by exhaustion, and something softer. Mom, I'm 31 now. I have a little boy named Daniel. Every time he laughs, I think of Dad. Every time he cries, I think of you. I don't want my son to grow up in a home full of silence. I want him to know that love is bigger than pride. She said she'd read my letters, the ones I thought she'd never opened. Grandma had kept them in a box all these years. I couldn't open them before, she wrote. I was scared they'd make me feel again. And then, at the very end, came the line I'd prayed for but never thought I'd see. Maybe we both punished the wrong person all these years. Maybe we both just needed someone to say it wasn't our fault. I'd like to see you, Mom, before it's too late. I pressed the paper to my chest and wept until I couldn't breathe. For 15 years I'd prayed for a miracle, and here it was, not in bright light or grand gestures, but in ink on paper, trembling between forgiveness and fear. I don't know how much time I have left, but I do know this. Sometimes the heart hears the apology long before the lips speak it. Sometimes love survives even when everything else fades. Tomorrow, I'll write her back. I'll tell her I'm still here. And I'll tell her what I should have said that night before Daniel left. I'm sorry. But this time, I'll also say something new. I forgive you too. When we carry guilt for too long, it becomes a language we forget how to translate. But forgiveness, that's the moment two hearts remember they once spoke the same tongue. Hattie's story reminds us, it's never too late to tell the truth. Never too late to write the letter you should have written years ago. Because love, real love, always finds its way home. Hattie's story is a reminder that silence can be a prison, and sometimes the key is simply saying I'm sorry. For 15 years, she carried her guilt like a stone inside her chest, heavy, cold, unmovable. And all along, her daughter carried the same stone too, shaped by anger instead of sorrow. Two hearts bound by the same pain, beating alone in different rooms. You see, guilt has a strange way of convincing us that punishment is love, that if we suffer long enough, maybe it'll make up for what we did wrong. But guilt doesn't heal. It doesn't rebuild. It only deepens the cracks until we start to believe we were meant to be broken. Hattie thought silence would protect her daughter from more pain. But silence doesn't protect, it isolates. It grows roots in the heart until even the memory of warmth feels distant. And yet, even in her silence, she never stopped loving. That's the cruel irony of guilt. It hides love behind fear. When Emily's letter arrived, it wasn't just paper. It was grace in ink, a reminder that love doesn't die. It just waits for courage to call it by name again, and that's what forgiveness truly is. It's not rewriting the past, it's freeing the heart that's still beating. We often think forgiveness means saying, it's okay, but no. My dear ones, forgiveness doesn't mean pretending it didn't hurt. Forgiveness means looking at the wound and saying, you don't control me anymore. It's not about the person who hurt us. It's about the peace we owe ourselves. When Hattie read that letter, she didn't just hear her daughter's voice. She heard her own soul exhale for the first time in years. And that's the power of truth. It may not bring back what we've lost, but it can still bring us home to ourselves. I've known many people like Hattie. Some write letters they never send. Some rehearse apologies they'll never speak. And some keep waiting for the perfect moment until life quietly runs out of tomorrows. But the truth is, there is no perfect moment. There is only now. If someone's name still trembles on your lips, say it. If you owe someone your truth, speak it. And if you're waiting for forgiveness, remember, healing begins the moment you forgive yourself. I think of Hattie sitting in her small house, holding that letter to her heart. For the first time in 15 years, the air must have felt light again, as if Daniel himself had walked through the door, smiling, whispering, it's finally over. And maybe that's how healing begins, not with a grand ending, but with a small breath of peace. We can't go back and change what happened. We can't rewrite the argument, the accident, the words that should have been swallowed, or the ones that were never said. But we can choose what happens next. We can choose kindness over pride. We can choose truth over silence. We can choose love again and again and again. So tonight, before you put your head on your pillow, I want you to think of someone you've been silent with. Maybe it's a mother, Maybe it's a friend. Maybe it's yourself. Pick up the phone. Write the letter. Say the words. Because sometimes all it takes to open the door again is a whisper. Hattie's story may be one of loss, but it's also one of courage. Because it takes courage to carry pain, but even greater courage to let it go. And so, my dear ones, remember this. Every story of loss can still end in grace if we find the courage to speak. If Hattie's story touched your heart tonight, maybe it's because you too have something you've been carrying in silence, a story you've never told, a letter you've never written, a truth that still waits to be spoken. If you ever wish to share your story with me, my dear, you can. I may not know your name, but I promise I'll hold your words with care. You can write to me in the comments below or send me your letter privately through the channel's email. Each week I read your messages, your memories, your heartbreaks, and sometimes, if you allow me, I share them here so others can find healing too. Because that's what Letters to Grace is all about. Not just stories of pain, but stories of courage. And maybe your story will be the next one to help someone else feel less alone. Until next time, take gentle care of your heart. Speak your truth, even if your voice trembles. And remember, every story of loss can still end in grace.